Hello, everyone that is coming into this conversation. We're about to start. It would just be a minute. Please share this feed on your own pages so that way more people can be part of this conversation. Thank you.
I thought you were going to be talking in Spanish.
I will right now. Look at this. Hola, saludos. Mi nombre es Manolo Concepción. Por favor, si puedes, compartan este feed en sus propias páginas y en sus propios grupos para que más personas puedan beneficiarse de esto.
That's better.
Hello, everyone. This is Manolo Concepcion. I am the new associate head coach at Eastern Illinois University. We have been doing this project of Volley Junkies now for around 2.5 months since this crisis began. I wanted to find a way to create an educational platform that will be reachable for everyone. And by bringing people from different volleyball communities around the world to share their backgrounds and experiences. Today, I'm really excited to bring one of the best, if not, one of the best top teachers in the United States of America of the game, beyond volleyball, just a great scientist of sports, Mr. Jim McLaughlin. ¿Cómo estás, amigo?
How are you?
Doing fine, doing fine. How has this process been for you, Jim? Like when this started, like how is Jim McLaughlin spending his time?
Well, Manolo, I've kind of used it to our advantage a little bit. I'm spending a lot of time with my daughters.
Mm.
We have dinner together every night. We're home most of the day. And we talk a lot, and it hasn't always been that way because I've been so busy. So it's a tough time, but we're trying to make the best of it. And it's been good for our family just in terms of the time spent together. But I feel bad for my daughters because they should be away at college. And hopefully it will return to normal soon or some kind of normal.
Jim, I have to ask you because of the moments that we're going through, but any thoughts on these issues of discrimination? This didn't start yesterday, it has been going on for hundreds of years, but any words of wisdom for the volleyball world out there, and how we can actually manage this situation and how can we become better at it?
Well, I think it's simple, treat people the way you want to be treated. And it's about other people. It's not about ourselves. And it's about how we help and we're aware of other people. And I don't think there's any other way to look at it. And when we get selfish, we act like idiots. And we got to think of other people and take responsibility for it. And step up to the plate and take some good swings.
One last question about that. How do you deal in your years of coaching in college? How do you deal with diversity and inclusion in your own locker room, Jim?
Well, I embraced it. I think that's what makes it great. You can learn from everybody and everyone's got a different story. And if you pay attention, you respect those stories. I think if we were all the same, it'd be lame, it'd be terrible. And I always felt like the diversity was the great thing about being on a team and being part of other people's cultures. When I traveled around the world, that was one thing I loved. I didn't want it to be like home. And so I don't know if I have any of the answers. I don't think I do. But for sure, I wanted people to be who they were and believe in that and have an opinion and stand up for it.
This is Jim McLaughlin. He is a volleyball legend in the United States of America. For everyone watching around the world, I am grateful for this opportunity to reaching all of you. Please know, for the ones that English is not the first language, that this is going to be available in YouTube, and YouTube allows you to have closed caption for any language around the world. So that way you can take that opportunity and apply your own language from your own country. Para los hispanohablantes, pueden buscarlo en YouTube luego y entonces poder encontrarlo en su propio lenguaje. Hey, Jim, I want to go back in your career before you were a player. Tell me a little bit of you, no, before you were a coach, tell me a little bit of you as a player. What can we know about you from those times and that shape you into what you became as a coach?
Wow, good question. I didn't play volleyball till late. I played every sport. Whatever sport was in season was my favorite sport. And I love sports. I love being on teams. I never really thought about volleyball. I grew up on the beach surfing. Surfing was one of the sports that I loved.
Nice.
And we did it every day. Every day the surf was good. And I grew up near the water, and I started playing a little bit of beach volleyball with friends who were surfers. And then I got asked to try out for a team, and I got into it. But I'll be honest with you, my love was football. And, I wanted to go as far as I could in football, but I got hurt. And back then, when I started playing, there wasn't all the weights and stuff. You just developed your legs so you could jump high. And I had knee surgery, and I did that. And I ended up getting offered a volleyball scholarship, and with 5 kids in the family. And my dad said, "Hey, you're taking it, and you're going to get an education." And I thank God every night to have been part of volleyball. It changed my whole life.
Jim, do you remember how much did you get paid that first year of you as a coach?
Yeah, I got paid $6,000. It was barely enough to cover rent. I bought a truck, but I never coached for the money. Manolo, I coached, and I got paid some money down the road, but I never got into coaching because of the money.
Absolutely. I think this is a game that we can all agree that Jim McLaughlin is involved in the game for a lot more beyond the money. And one of the biggest things that allows me to admire you so much, Jim, it's how obsessed you are for the science of the game, for the loss of learning. Why is this so important, to you, and why should it be important to all coaches around the world, no matter the level, Jim?
Well, I mean, we can talk about coaching, and coaching is a lot of things. But if you talk about teaching and you want to be a teacher, then you got to follow some laws of learning. You've got to know about teaching in order to make an impact on somebody. Manolo, the longer I've coached and been involved in coaching, the more I've come to the conclusion that it was more and more to me every day about teaching. And it wasn't about concepts. It wasn't about novel ideas. It wasn't about systems or plays. It was about finding ways to practice better and teach your players better so they become more proficient and efficient at doing the things that you want them to do. And it wasn't just about telling them how to do things. It was about teaching them how to commit at a higher level. It was about teaching them to really work harder. People have tremendous ability, tremendous potential, but sometimes they limit themselves. And I felt like teaching was also helping people, pushing them the right way, getting them on the edge of their ability. And then at some point, they begin to believe they can do these things that they didn't think they could do. And for me, that was a lot of fun. I love being in the gym and seeing people change every day.
We're talking to Jim McLaughlin, who has been 19 times in the NCAA tournament, has a 71% win percentage in the NCAA Division I, has won a national championship with both men's and women's in the NCAA Division I, has reached the Final Four 3 years in a row and 4 total. Jim.
6.
Oh, Even better, Jim. Jim, Trevor Regan came to the program the other day and he mentioned something that stuck to me because you have mentioned something similar in your coaching clinics. And it's about the feelings about feelings. How I feel about learning, how I feel about getting better, how I feel about changing could determine a lot, not just for me individually, but in building a program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Feelings come and go. You got to be careful about your feelings. And I always wanted the feeling or have my players to understand the feelings of great investment, an emotional investment into what they're doing. I challenged them all the time. I would tell them, feel versus real. They feel so many things, and how much of those feelings are actually real. We all go through it as we learn how to learn. And that's the ultimate survival skill and that's part of what we've got to do as teachers. We've got to teach people to learn. And part of that are these feelings that come and go. An example is, players come into your office and say, I didn't have a good practice. And then we look at the film and we see the progress they made. And so that feeling changed. Or they come in and they say, hey, Jim, I was great. I did it. And then we look at the practice and we go, oh, we could have made more progress.
Completely different.
So, the other day I took a lesson for my golf swing. And the teacher was filming me and showing me things. And he said, what do you feel here? And I wasn't even close. And he says, nope, that's not right. Here's what's happening. And it really helped me. And then as I started to change my mechanics, slowly I got the feeling of what it was when I did it right. And I thought that was important.
Learning to learn, Jim, the skill acquisition process, we don't control that as coaches, the learner does. How do we become better at this? How do we become better at getting in touch with that learner, making sure that we are fair, but at the same time, giving them some room to make mistakes, to be vulnerable? What are some keys that you have used throughout your career?
Boy, I think that's the essence of coaching and teaching. Just being aware of your students, being aware of them as people. We all have a different conduit to learning. And our job as a teacher is to find out just what their needs are. And everybody has different needs. And then we have to serve those needs to help them. But there's no magic here. It takes time. It takes great awareness of the teacher to help the student have greater awareness, specifically in the moment of learning. When we go to practice, Manolo, I don't think it's about going to practice to beat Stanford or UCLA or SC. I think we're going to practice to learn more about ourselves and to be the best that we can be. But very few people max out. It's not human nature. It's too hard. And I think our job is to help them through that process of achieving. And achievement is very difficult. To become great is really, really hard. But at some point you embrace it, you take responsibility for it, you become responsible for learning, and you let the coach help you. So I don't know if there's any magic to it. It's hard, but it's worth it and it's fun.
Who are some of the best learners you have coached in the NCAA and why? Can you give me examples?
Yeah. They all have a different pace of learning. And they fluctuated, and you just had to know where they were at and what they needed at that time. And it takes great focus to really be connected to them and understand them. But they were all, Crystal Morrison was an unbelievable learner. And I remember one time I'm talking about just converting her forward speed into vertical height with a double arm lift. And she had this little chicken arm. And I said, Chris, you got to get your arms straight, reach back, throw your arms vigorously, and take your center of gravity up into the air. But because you're a spiker, you're going to get parallel, then you can separate. And she said to me, Jim, I'm doing that. And I said, Chris, I'm not going to lie to you. You're not doing it. Come on, throw your arm. And we watched the film and the tears came, and then she saw it and she made the change, but they were all like that. And she became one of the toughest players. Courtney Thompson was phenomenal, but they all, I can't single anybody out.
Do you talk about this during the recruiting process, Jim, that, hey, if you come to my gym, I want you to be learners. We're going to emphasize a lot of motor learning. Do they know this coming into a program like yours? And how do you build that type of culture, Jim, where they buy into this?
Well, it takes time. The relationship takes time. They're just not going to buy into me until I've earned the right. And but I tell them up front, but it doesn't really mean anything, And at some point, they have an understanding of what I'm talking about, and they know what to do, and then they've got to go do it. Knowing's the easy part, then they've got to go do these things. But we celebrate these little successes along the way. The biggest picture I paint for them is that we're going to be very honest with them, and it's going to be really difficult. Everybody thinks you get to the Final Four, it's so easy, and the better you get, the harder it is. But great players find a way to keep getting better and better and better.
You mentioned something in 2017 in a coaching clinic that I went, and when you were presenting that, just stuck with me, and it was the why will come. That players need to know that we're not going to give them all the answers right away. I explain what I have to explain, I provide the keys, and then the why will come. What do you mean by that?
Well, how you'll have a job, why you'll be the boss. And, you want to teach people how to do things clearly, but they need an understanding of why this way might be better than that way. And so, that's the meaning will come sometimes in learning. Manolo, it's hard in the moment to feel the improvement. But if you stick with it because of the whys, and you get down the road 3-4 weeks, you look back and you go, oh, I got it. And the meaning will come and you've made a lot of progress. So the answers don't come right away. There's a lot of trust. But you earn that trust by being consistent with your players. And I always defended it with film. I didn't just say, do it because Jim said. I said, do it because of these principles. Do it because, and I would show them. And over time, they would start to believe me. And then the improvement became a little bit addictive because, I'm not going to let them down. I'm not making up stuff. I'm going to study stuff and I'm going to apply it. And hopefully when I go home, that's what I thought about driving home. We presented some info, were they applying it? And that was the deal. And it was simple stuff.
You went to Washington and basically, with the respect of the coaches that went before you, you build that from ground up. Do you know right away that you could make that program into a national championship program, Jim? Like what do you come on with? In those first years, do you compromise on any of your principles to try to get to a happy medium, or you had your principles already established and they knew what to expect?
Well, I believed in what we were going to do. I had confidence that we could change that program, but I knew it was going to take time. We were the new kids on the block. Those kids have been there. I was going to come in and try to change some things. But it was their university and I was joining them. And so the first thing is I just wanted them to trust me and started to build a culture. And it took time, but you know, and then I paid attention to each individual, because I think you develop a team through the individuals, you know, and as you start to train them, and everybody's different, they develop a role. Each kid has to have a role. And we just invested in the players. And I would ask two questions every week. Are we playing harder every week? That was something that we had to do over time, learn how to play harder every week, develop that tolerance, not just physically, but emotionally and
I
mentally.
love that. The beginning was all about that. Okay.
And then, you know, oh, I lost my train of thought. I don't know, we just started thinking about those things and developing our tolerance, working hard. And then I wanted to see if we could play a little faster, but it wasn't speed of play. It was responding to situations. It was seeing the game better and getting from point A to point B better because of our focus. And so I always ask those questions, but Manolo, I asked it to the players. Are you guys playing harder? And are you guys playing faster? And I asked them after every practice, and as they started to fill in their journals, they started to associate good practices and improvement to their focus, their energy, all those things, coming to practice more prepared. And I just wanted them for 2 hours to give everything they had to that program and to their own development. And then the kids would develop their own roles. They develop an identity. We keep expanding those roles. And then people started to respect each other because of the way we did our work. And then as we got more consistent, they started trusting each other. And I think those are the cornerstones to a good team culture.
Really early in the 2000s, you went to Puerto Rico and you were recruiting a player. You came to my house and you showed me very passionately this VHS video. It was the first video that you know that was created for your program and everything, and you were trying to sell the future of your program at that point. You were so passionate about what you believe in, and now you speak about the right energy in the gym. Talk to me about that, because sometimes we can think that energy is subjective. What is the right amount of energy, and how do you define the right energy in a gym?
Oh boy, I don't know. You know, coaches would come in and watch us train, and one of the greatest compliments, I would hear them say, everything is so important to these kids. And you know, I would tell them, if you lose your focus, you lose energy. It's like you go home at night, you sit on the couch, you turn on the TV, you fall asleep. And if you learn how to focus on the right things, and then you learn how to concentrate over time, your energy level is higher. And we only have so much energy. So we got to burn it at the right times. And if volleyball and their improvement was really important, they were going to get some sleep, they were going to eat right, and they were going to come to practice to give everything they had for 2 hours. And then we were going to turn it off, we'd decompress, put on our beats, listen to music. And, you know, I'd send them little clips of film, but I just wanted them for 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours, to give everything they had. And very few of us will do something and just go to the limits where, you know, it stresses us. But then we figure out we can do this. I can go a little harder. And then they get a little more comfortable, you know, being on the edge for that long.
Teaching players how to see is also one of your bread and butters, Jim, and what to see. How do you go about that? Have you evolved in that subject, Jim, from early 2000s to, you know, to the later version of Jim?
Oh yeah, every day I try to evolve in every aspect of teaching and coaching and everything. You know, you got to get better at. I believe that. I was at a Final Four and an ESPN reporter asked, "Is this your greatest time?" And I said, "No, you know, my best day is I'm still getting better and better and better." Or he asked if our best time was when we won at Washington or we won at SC. And I said, every day I keep getting better and better because I'm in the gym coaching. So, boy, I don't know. I just loved it so much that I had to set the example and give everything I had as a teacher and a coach. I don't know if that answers your question.
Jim, we all want to know what's a weekly routine of Jim McLaughlin. Let's start thinking that we're in a normal situation, Jim, and you're in preseason. What's a normal weekly routine? How does Jim McLaughlin coaching routines look like with planning, with operational stuff? How do you establish those big rocks?
Well, boy, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I was getting up, 5:30 in the morning, and I was getting home. My wife, thank God for Margaret, because she used to tell me many times I was helping raise other kids and she was raising our kids. But I would be up early in the morning before the kids got up, and I'd be home after they were already in bed. And, I don't know if that's good. But I would get up early in the morning, and I would usually try to get a workout in. If I didn't, I'd try to go at lunchtime. And I don't know, I'd get in, and the first thing I did was I would make sure practice was in order. And it took me about 2.5 hours. It was the most important thing I thought I could do that day, is to make sure our lesson plans were in place. And I spent 2.5, then I met with my staff and we'd go over it. And then throughout the day, we were watching film. We were doing everything we could to prepare to have a good day in practice. And I don't remember exactly, but it seemed like every minute was accounted for. And every Monday was like every Monday. Every Tuesday was like every Tuesday. Every Wednesday was like and if we screwed up on Tuesday, we screwed up the whole week. And I adopted something from one of the great head coaches at Washington, Don James. He said, you got to go home early on Thursday and have dinner with your wife. And so we would do that. We would try to get out of the office early. We knew we were traveling on Friday morning or Thursday night. And I just went and spent some time with Margaret. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but it was a 17-hour day for sure.
And it's a great answer, Jim, because we really want to know what made you this legend that you are right now in the U.S., in the NCAA, the respect that you have had among your peers, and it has been through hard work. So we want to know how does that hard work looks like. And tell me, can you take me inside of your video sessions, Jim? Like, how long were they? And let's say that you're meeting with a setter on a Monday or Tuesday. What are you talking about?
Well, we're just studying our behaviors. We're studying our movements. We're studying how we react to situations. We're looking at everything we do. We're looking at our standards. Are we meeting some standards with great regularity? And if we weren't, what was the reason for that? And then we could go work on those things. But we had a pretty good grasp of what we wanted to do, how we wanted to do it, and then we worked towards that end. And we knew where we were at and where we wanted to go, and we just kept working. And I like to show on film a lot of the improvement the girls were making. We can get into a deal where we're error detectors and all we do is break down the player instead of building the player towards that end. We all make mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. I wanted players to start to cherish these mistakes. I wanted them to grab onto it, investigate it, and not run away from it. So over time, they got more comfortable looking at these things. and we'd take notes and they'd take notes in their journal. And then before practice, we'd set up whiteboards and we'd show a couple clips of what we wanted to do. And then we'd go out and get those repetitions. So it took time for us to really look at the film the right way, you know, and see the things that we were supposed to see. It's not what you look at, it's what you see. And I had to coach them and show them these little idiosyncrasies that we could fix and how that could impact them down the road. And so it was a really fun process, but I watched a lot of film. The kids would come in and watch maybe 10 minutes one-on-one, and then they'd go be students. And in our team sessions, maybe we'd go 20 minutes, maybe a half hour, but not much longer than that.
How does the timeout looks for you in a game? Offensive timeout, defensive timeout? What's your format? Are you talking to your staff before you meet with the team? Are assistant coaches talking to specific positions? How do you handle that time? What do you think is the most efficient way to handle timeouts, Jim?
Well, I'm just trying to help our kids. You know, it's a little different than practice. You know, you're changing behavior, you're thinking about things a little deeper. In a game, I'm just trying to provide some information to our team to help them. And I'm also asking them questions, you know, to see what they're perceiving as what's happening out there. So there's not a lot of discussion in a timeout. There's one or two basic points, and then we tell them, and then they'd go out and play. But I also wanted to hear what they had to say at times. But, you know, the preparation, Manolo, was Monday through Thursday. And there were subtle adjustments on game day. But I would never ask a player to do anything that we hadn't rehearsed and they felt comfortable doing. So it wasn't like there was anything earth-shattering during timeouts. You know, maybe we'd stall if a team got hot. Maybe we had to get back on track a little bit, but it was nothing magic.
Jim, I want to go back to one of your years in Washington. You decided to go with a 6'2", and you have spoken about all the statistical process that you went through to make sure that you were doing the right thing in that matter. And to make sure that you're being the most efficient, that people are coming in and out for the person that they're supposed to. Of course, you know, one of the reasons that I'm asking is because one of them was with Jennifer Noguera's Puerto Rican player as well. So I just want to know, like, when you're going through this with measuring performance and trying to be fair with the players and the process itself, what are some keys that you went through that worked for you? Because of course that team with that format was extremely successful.
And the team before him was pretty successful with a 5-1. So we were, as people developed, I remember we had a kid named Kaylee Nelson, and she started to develop as a kind of an outside hitter. And her numbers were getting better and better. And so that gave us another hitter. And so I started to just make the comparison in our serve receive in the 4-2s and the 6-0s, and our point scoring in the 4-2s and the 6-0s, our serving, everything we did, and just made a comparison to where we were better and why we were better. And I looked at enough things to make a decision on, we're going to go in this direction. But it was hard because we had a very good team the year before. And here I am changing the systems, but I really changed the systems because other people developed and we had some more options, and then I had to test them. And I tested both situations. And when the numbers came up, I felt like we scored points and we sided out better in those 6-2s. And then Jenny Nogueras, you know, she made more improvement. I mean, it was unbelievable. I remember one meeting with her, and she came in, and she's a passionate young lady. And I love that about her. And she came into my office and said, Jim, you don't give me enough credit. I'm working so hard. And I love the kid. And I told her, Jenny, you know what? We could go in the weight room right now. We could jump on a Stairmaster or a treadmill and we could sweat and work hard, but we didn't move forward as a setter. I want you to approach every set like it's a Final Four set, like it's a championship set. And that's hard emotionally, you know, to hold yourself and make yourself accountable. One play could define the whole match. And you got to play one play at a time. And she looked at me and she said, I got it. Both of her parents were PhDs from Penn State. And thank God for them. They said, listen to him. He's telling you the truth. And she worked and came back. Her approach in practice was different. And that girl led us to the Final Four. Wow. I mean, her energy, her focus was better. Her energy was better. She was an unbelievable kid. So, you know, we had a dogfight, and she didn't like me very much when I benched her. But I told her, hey, you got to get better. And you got to be so good that I have to play you. And she did it. She got better, became a good server, a great setter, played great defense. And she led that team to the Final Four with Katie Beals and Krista Van Sant, and just a great team.
Both Jenny and Michelle are outstanding competitors, great learners, not a coincidence, because as you say, the way that they were raised, I think that has to do a lot with how good of a learner one's become later on. So, you know, props for her, props for them, props for you to working with that. With that, I tell you, what are some key elements that we need to take in consideration if we're considering, do we go with a 5-1? Do we go with a 6-2? Speaking about women's volleyball specifically, do I need an amazing slide hitter to consistently stay on my 5-1? Or what are the key elements to go from one system to the other for the people watching around the world right now, Jim?
Well, I mean, you just got to put them in those situations and test them. Mm-hmm. You know, and then you get the data and you see where you can make the biggest impact with your team. But I think it starts with just developing people. Don't have all these preconceived conceptions on or perceptions of, you know, which way we need to go. Just start developing people and the answers come. You know, as Kaylee got better, we had the option. And one of my pet peeves was, could I get our best 6 volleyball players on the floor? You know, because that's how you get to Final Fours, if you have a number of good foundational volleyball players that have good fundamentals and they can respond to situations. And as people develop, boy, you have more options, and then you got to test everything you do. We can have all these intuitions and great ideas, but we got to test them. Just like we start to test our players and get them ready emotionally to battle. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't test them too early. You know, you got to test them at the right time, and you got to make things difficult because it's gonna get really hard. But Manolo, I challenge them every day, number one, to just make individual improvements. And then I challenge them, number two, as a group to solve problems. And we got to figure out which is the best direction we got to go in. And then we got to learn how to win. And winning isn't like everybody thinks. People think we control. Winning is so fragile. You know, if you understand success, it's fragile. And you got to do all the things, and they got to be lined up to win consistently at a high level. And so I don't know if that's a good answer, because, you know, I'm not in their gym. I would study my players, and I put the pieces out there that gave us the best chance to win.
Jim, one of your biggest mentors, is not a secret, was Dr. Carmack Gowan. What was the hardest feedback he gave you that shook you for a minute and you say, man, you're brutal, but you're right? and kind of like shape you later on?
Well, I got asked to coach the Pan American team. And I was so excited. I was so fired up. And I wrote out my first 30 practices. It took me 3 weeks. And here's day one, here's day two, just like the NFL, installation day one, installation day two. And I brought it to McGowan with so much, I was so happy and had pride, and threw it on his desk. And he looked at it and said, "You don't know what you're doing." And I mean, my heart sunk, but I'm more thankful for that guy because he told me, he said, "Jim, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know teaching. You think you know. I admire your hard work, but there's lots of people that work hard. You need to become a great teacher." And that hurt like you wouldn't believe. But then, you know what? He stuck around and he said, "I'll help you." And I tapped into that. I watched him train. And over time, I saw how he got things in place. I got to go to 2 Olympics, and I worked with him just identifying the best teams in the world and their characteristics, their identities, how they scored points, how they sided out, and how we could play against them. And then I saw him get those things in place. So he taught me so much stuff, but he also told me I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And he was right, but I thought I did, you know.
Identifying the things that you don't know, how important that is for all of us, Jim. Like those moments, like I know that Mario Benedetti has a really good quote that I always remember, that once you think you know all the answers, all the questions change. You know, like that constant search. You know, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and we're always learning. And then you start to know stuff, but that doesn't mean you can do stuff. You know, that's why you give a lecture to people and they think they know. It's just like our players. They start to understand what they're supposed to. They think they can do it, but they have to go out and learn how to do it. And it's the same thing with coaching. You know, you can't read a book and all of a sudden you've got to go in the gym in your sanctuary and you've got to learn how to teach. And when you're done teaching, you've got to ask the question, how do I get better? How can I do that better? How can I get these kids to work harder, stay more connected? And then the results, you know, will come. But yeah, I'm learning stuff new every day. And there's more out there for sure.
Jim, we all know, of course, about how much success you have had, the highest level, and how much you fought for those successes. I want to know, are there any times that you feel that you got on the way of winning that haunts you still? Like, are there any moments that you can share with us that we can go back and we can all learn from it?
Yeah, for sure. I think as a teacher, as I started to understand it more, great teachers won't let anything get in the way of developing their team, even losing. And there were times I didn't want to lose. And there were times that we're up 2-0 and volleyball is, you know, the momentum switch. I wanted to end the match. I wanted to win the match instead of developing people and getting other kids who are working hard on the floor. And so even if you lose the match, you know, we went through something at Washington, Manolo, where, you know, winning was so glorious. It was so unbelievable because we didn't win very much the first couple of years. I mean, we cherished it. And then all of a sudden we started winning and it became kind of the norm. And then losing started to really hurt. And winning wasn't so euphoric. It wasn't this. And so I think, again, you can't prevent yourself from doing anything that's going to develop the team. And early on in my career, I should have played more people when I had the opportunity to do that, to prepare more people. And then for sure, there were times that I look back and I should have made a sub earlier. I should have called a timeout earlier. And there's some matches that, for some reason, those tough matches don't go away. The championships go away a little bit, but you still remember a couple points that if I had done something different, maybe the outcome would have been different.
What was the biggest one, Jim? What was the biggest one that you still think about it and you like, kicking yourself?
I think one of them was we had a team that developed, and our goal was the NCAA Final Four was going to be in Seattle. And we wanted to represent, it was Jenny Nagaris's team. And, I think part of what we do as teachers is we have to be able to teach and meet some standards and not let these expectations screw up how we play. Mm-hmm. And we've got to learn how to play loose. And I was pretty tight. I was pretty determined. And when I look back, I could have just maybe lifted the tea kettle and let some steam out, and I think the players picked up on me being a little tight, and we played really tight in the Final Four and lost to Penn State. After coming back from being 2 down and beating SC on their home floor. But I should have given the kids a couple days off. I was back on the horse riding hard Sunday. And I just looked back and said, if I could have approached it differently, I would have. But I'll also tell you this, we were at a point in the development of the program where getting to Sweet 16s wasn't good enough anymore. And we had to but I like that. And I think the kids embrace that. I just should have handled it a little differently.
Wow. No, it's unbelievable that you're sharing all this, because we all feel that way at some point in our careers, where because we feel so tight or about the expectation, we transmit that to the players itself. What's the biggest lesson that time has given you about feedback?
Well, I believe that feedback is the single most important element in learning. But there's so many types of feedback, and you got to pay attention to the right feedback. And as a teacher, you got to give the right feedback. You can't talk too much, and there are times you got to back off and help the student figure it out on their own a little bit. You can't, they're not robots. You can't program them and get them. You got to help them learn how to play the game. And then you got to put them in environments where they got to solve these problems. And we all have problems, and the opponent's trying to cause problems, and the game causes problems. And so, I don't know, maybe problems are okay. We've always said problems prevent us from getting to where we want to go, and that's a source of feedback. Maybe if we approach problems the right way, and they strengthened us, and they fortified us, and they made us better towards that end, maybe problems are okay if we can solve them and learn how to do that. So I don't know. Feedback, the best players I've ever been around, the best coaches wanted every form of feedback to help them.
Talk to me about the role clarity, because Jim, now with this portal, the transfer portal, this instant gratification obsession, there's so much that we need to be careful about what we say to a player. Hey, Jim, you might not play, you might not start. How do we manage that? How do we keep the number 12 player happy enough for her to anyway stay motivated enough and stay in our program, even though we don't need to convince players to be part of our culture? But how do we keep everyone on the same boat?
Well, I don't think it's about, I think that's the deal, keeping everybody in the boat, and one person falls out, we're all drowned, but I don't think, teams are fragile. Players are fragile. I used to put so much thought into what I was going to tell the team, what I would tell an individual. And I put more thought into that than how we were going to pass or how we were going to block. because these kids, you have to give them the right feedback. You got to be honest with them. Sometimes the truth hurts, but they can handle it. And I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think everybody's got a role, and it's different. It's not like a group of friends where there's no hierarchy and all that. You know, you have a role, and you've got to perform and do your role because you're on this team, not because I like you more than because I'm on the team and I have a job to do. So I don't know if that answers.
Do you talk to them in the beginning of the season about what you project their role would be? Do you talk to them right before the first match of the season? Like, how do you manage that feedback about who starts, who doesn't? You know, you run a system basically, Jim, where the star of the team is the actual system itself. Everyone working for one same objective. So in a program like that, when is the right time to approach that type of conversation?
Well, it's ongoing. You know, we're doing it early, and I want to know from the player what they want to be and what they're willing to do to become what they want to become. And are their behaviors going to be in line with these objectives? And then it's just what you control is just your improvement and getting a little bit better every day. You know, I always wanted kids that wanted to win championships, but I wanted kids that wanted to work hard and continue to improve and do the things it takes to become great. And that's really hard, especially in November when your body's tired, your mind's tired, and you got to go to class and you sprain your ankle. It's so hard, but it's so great, and you can't put into words the gratification you get on the return. So, you know, I'm talking to kids all the time. I always felt they could come into my office and ask any questions, and mostly ask for help. And then I felt like if they did that, we had a safe environment and I could continue to push them. So yeah, I think relationships is the number one thing. I think attitude towards our approach is the number two thing. And I think we control those things.
When talking about learning, resting, recovery, all these matters are so important almost as much as what we actually do. How did you evolve in that subject, Jim? Like, what do you think is really important right now? And let's say that we're only talking now NCAA here, you know, the college system here in USA. How will you approach a brutal season when it's a normal, regular season? How do you approach that subject with so many responsibilities with these student athletes?
Well, you have to keep an eye on them and see where they're at. You can tell if you're connected to your team when they walk in, if they're fatigued, if they're normal, if they're different, if something's up. And you're paying attention. You have to have great maturity and awareness of your kids. And you have to know, as much as we have to push people, we also have to know when to back off. Because you have to recover. If you recover right, you can train at a higher level with even greater intensity. And I think that's what we're supposed to do. I'd rather train for a shorter period with a high level of intensity than be medium for a long period of time. So I don't know, as the season goes, we would taper our volume. We'd maintain the intensity. We'd keep our minds as fresh as we could. I would ask the players on occasion, how do you feel on a scale of 1 to 10? And they were very honest. Early on, Jim, we can do anything. Jim, we're okay. And then they said, Jim, we're dying. And I give them a day off. But I had to learn that. And that was something McLaughlin taught me. He says, you go, Jim, you got to give them a day off. No, we're going to outwork people. We're going to be tougher than, and I was screwing my team up. And once I started to give them the right recovery, we trained better. And that was just paying attention to where they're at.
Block versus random, Jim. The eternal discussion and debate. There's not a right amount, but what has worked for you in terms of those amounts and when during the season?
Well, the issue is transfer. As a teacher, the issue is transfer. How much transfer to these activities? And I hear people say that all the time, and it's true as a teacher. But I think you got to have both. I mean, if you think about the appropriate regulatory stimuli, the game teaches the game. We've got to put them in the situations and have the great randomness of the game. But I do think it's appropriate to have block training. You know, when you're talking about the fundamentals and you're introducing stuff for the first time, it's okay to have a block session until they have an understanding and awareness of this. And then we can start to make the drill more aggressive, more game-like. And the kids can not only learn how to move, but they can learn how to see the game and respond to it. So I know that a part of my practice every day was a little bit of tutoring, and our players loved it. And we could maybe, the drill wasn't as aggressive, and we'd have the outsides on one court, the middles on the other court. Setters would switch at 7.5 minutes. We'd go 15 minutes, and we'd replicate and rehearse these different movements that the players would use in the game, or we'd work on things that they weren't doing enough, you know, that they weren't confident in. And we'd get higher number of repetition. We could give more specific feedback with better regularity, and we could help the kids. And then we could make it more game-like as we went. And we would play, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes to every 10, 15 minutes we tutored. So, you know, I don't know, you know, Brad Stevens was, he's an NBA coach with Boston Celtics. And I got to talk to him, and I asked him the same question. And he said, you know, my rookies come in to the NBA and we spend a lot of time on the fundamentals, basic things, and we play. So 50-50. And then he said, as they get better at the fundamentals, we're playing a lot more. But then he said, when they become all-stars, they'll come into practice one day and work 30, 40 minutes on one specific movement, just a fundamental move. So again, it's paying attention to your team, but in terms of the process of teaching, I think it's appropriate to do some block work, you know, but for sure, the game teaches the game. But Manolo, the bigger the game, the fewer the reps. So we can get a lot of reps in these little tutoring sessions.
How do we know as coaches, you know, what are some signs that a player, a learner, it's still assessing the motor program of a skill? You know, that associative stage, let's say I'm working with something that has a little bit of block, but also random. How do I make sure that I allow some time during that crucial moment of learning?
Well, let me tell you, I did a little study for a couple college coaches, and I was just looking at left side attack. I'm just looking at left side attack. I'm looking at goes, a little faster set in serve receive and transition. I'm looking at huts, a little higher set in serve receive, bad passes, and in transition. And I'm studying good swings. And I would look at it 3 times. So I'd look at the first play where the hitter hit and record the result. And then I'd slow-mo it, and I'd look at the hitter's timing, the hitter's movements, the balance, the rhythm, how they're addressing the ball, and watch them hit it. And then I'd go back and look at it again, and I'd look at where the defense was relative to the situation. And I saw some things. I saw that these players that got the best swings had these fundamental movements in place that were very common. They were these habitual movement patterns. Now, I saw some variation, but I also saw that they were smooth, they were efficient, they were simple. It almost looked like they were natural, you know? And when I watched these kids that got bad swings of these players, I saw all these idiosyncrasies adding up, these hands, and they weren't very simple. And for sure, they weren't smooth or in rhythm and all that stuff. And so I just studied these hitters. And I could see these things that separated the behaviors of good swings versus bad swings.
Mhm.
And so it was all about these movements. So these kids that have all these movements and these idiosyncrasies clearly don't have the fundamentals in place. They don't have that foundation.
Hmm.
And I think we have to build that foundation. And then if we do that, the stronger the foundation, the more they can respond to this variability. You know, they can make adjustments to plays. And so,
So training movement before anything else.
well, no, I think you got to combine it. You got to teach them how to move, and then you got to teach them how to see.
Mhm.
And the limiting factor, I believe, to players are these flaws in these movements.
Hmm.
The limiting factor in performance are flaws in their mechanical movements. You know, if they don't have the right block movement, they're going to be limited. If their hips aren't facing the post and they're square, they're not going to be able to go as far. They're limited.
Mhm.
And their hands can limit them and their arms. And so once we start to, these movements become part of us and they're not thinking about them, they're just doing them. They're in the subconscious, which works 500 times faster than the conscious. Then we've got to do the same thing with their eye work and have them use those movements in these specific situations.
Hmm.
And so some of the best players I've ever coached, they knew what their bodies were doing when they responded to a situation. And so I don't know, I think that's part of being mindful. You know, what is your body doing and what do you want it to do? You know, and yeah, it's hard stuff, but it's fun stuff.
Arm mechanics. How do we make sure that we use our critical mass efficiently and release energy when we need to? You know, I see so much film on and hitters releasing that energy much before that final torque and full swing, not going from slow to fast. You know, like how do we protect that? How do we make sure that we continue to get better at that? What do we need to be looking for as coaches, Jim?
When they hit hard,
Yes, how do we develop better better and more efficient hitters in terms of arm mechanics?
well, you said it, you know, you got to stay within your critical mass when you go. And I see kids that aren't within that, but there are some biomechanics that have proven if you torque versus pike, you're going to hit the ball harder. And so we want to teach them how to separate and get that right shoulder back and let that left arm keep going so they can torque. It's a mechanical efficiency issue. And now some people have better arms than other people. You know, they just do, but everybody can improve.
Hmm.
And the mechanics can help them improve. And so we spent a lot of time early refining our mechanics in everything we did.
Hmm.
But the arm swing is hard to help a kid that has bad mechanics. It's hard to change, but you can help them improve. I had a kid at Notre Dame that was a classic pike hitter, and it was in her hard wiring. And I remember talking to Carl about it, and we worked every day to get her shoulder back and her elbow down and through torque every day. And she got a little bit better over time, but she never hit the ball as hard as Crystal Morrison. But she was a better, and she became adequate. And she was a middle hitter that could kind of poke the ball around a little bit. So I think the movements are critical. There are biomechanics in every sport, you know, and then you've got to teach them how to see and play the game, and they got to respond to these situations efficiently.
The easy thing to see in your film, Jim, is that everyone is doing the same things, trying to look at the same things as well, and movements, including the setter. You know, we see your setters 45 degrees, 3-step to the ball every time they can. What are some things that behind the scenes you do to create these efficiency movements, especially in a setter? Like what would you prioritize for all of us coaches watching, this transmission? What would be, the top 3 things that we should be emphasizing the most when training a setter?
Well, the best setters, what do? They put up good hittable balls. They can keep a hitter in rhythm. They're accurate. They can get the ball to go where they want it to go. And so I think about the contributions the best setters make. And the number one contribution that I've always studied was they could locate the ball to the pins. And it happens more often, specifically the left side. And so we got to train that. And we got to teach them in perfect situations and not so perfect situations. And then we got to teach them when they're way off the net. And we just have to get these movements that allow them to get to the ball and be efficient and redirect the ball. And so it takes a lot of time, but I would show our kids film of the top setters. Now, Manolo, these people are different because they're not robots. But when I study the outside hitters and I study setters, I see these basic fundamentals that are almost the same. And there's variation based on their size and their length and their speed. But when you talk about an identity, or maybe they have a style or a tendency, that's more about this setter could set overhead a little bit. This setter can set quick a little bit more. Oh, she dumps the ball. But the movements are in place. I saw that with hitters. This hitter hit a little bit more line. This hitter hit more angle. This hitter hit off the block. I remember when Taylor Sander hit like 17 roll shots that fell in the World Championships. So the identity and style is about what they do, but how they do it, when you study their basic mechanics, there's some similar movements in terms of the fundamentals. And the variation is because of body size and length and speed. So you have to follow these principles, the principles of setting. And, and then we would just train them. And sure, it's hard. We get them to locate the ball, then we get them to try to set quick and make choices. And then we'd try to get them to become better servers and diggers and blockers. And we get them to understand attack points. What are the best attack points given the situation? And we try to get them to understand their teammates. Is this choice better than that choice? But what if so-and-so's in the game? And we would rehearse that over and over and over. So there was some comfort level in being who they were when we played. And I don't know, it's so much fun doing that with your players.
To pivot or not to pivot?
Well, you can't pivot all the time. And when you're in a hurry and you're going to redirect the ball off the net, I think pivoting is the best way to do it. I hear coaches say, hey, we got to touch our left foot and make a 4-step. I have never seen a setter set a set behind when they do that. And I've always said the same is the same is the same. And we want to repeat these movements over and over and over. And so, but when you're at the net, you don't want to, I see junior girls doing that. You don't need to pivot. And so getting your players to understand when the pivot, they benefit from it and when they don't. And when they go off their left foot is more appropriate. And why going off your right, why facing the ball and then extending and squaring to the target is a good way to do it.
Serving has become so important in modern volleyball, Jim. What are some things that, knowing that you do a lot of research, what are some things that you have found out that we need to take in consideration when working on this matter?
Well, serving by nature is no fun. It's not like digging a ball, blocking a ball, hitting a ball, setting a ball.
A close skill, yes.
Yeah, it's closed, but it maybe is the most important skill. How could that be? It's no fun, but it's the most important skill. So you got to get kids that are emotionally connected to training. They can't just go serve, serve, serve. You know, they've got to serve it, see it, feel it, and adjust it, and work at it, and meet some standards with their serve. And it's your serve. You know, you you can't blame anybody. And what does your serve say about you? You know, why can't you have a great serve? What is preventing somebody from having the best server ever was Courtney Thompson. She had a jump float that could rip the hearts out of people. You know, she could get it into the seam. She could get it to move. She could get it to drop. She could hit a great serve. And so I think you got to start practice with serving. You got to end practice with serving because it's so important. Hopefully the players are staying after and getting extra reps like a shooter in basketball with their serve. But my question to them, are they getting ready every day to hit a good serve at a really tough time? And then there's a way to train that. There's a way to get better at it. And like you said, it's a closed skill, and you could go in by yourself and practice it. And then we can put some pressure on them in practice.
Jim, I want to ask you something. And in no way I can compare myself to you, but my career as a player ended forcefully with an injury. Your career as a coach ended forcefully with an injury. You know what? Where are you at right now? How do you feel physically? And what were some things that you still wanted to achieve before that happened, Jim?
You know, I'm getting better. I got to the point I had 2 ruptured discs and I had a drop foot. And so I was rolling around in practice in a chair. And the tough part was, you know, you get into practice and you can kind of get so into it emotionally, you can block other things out. I just couldn't stand very long. But then after practice, I would go back and I would review practice. And I'd look at every play. And that took 2.5 hours. And I couldn't do that anymore. So, you know, I just felt like I wasn't giving the players everything they needed and everything they deserved as a coach. And so I just needed to get my health back. I was 21 days away from a surgery. I thank God every night I haven't had to have that surgery. I got into a rehab program that I do like going to church. I do it every day. And my back is stronger. My the core is much stronger. It took pressure off the nerve. My drop foot went away. They just cleared me to do a fast walk, very, very slow jog.
Yes.
They told me I could never run again. I was done with that. But now they told me I'm taken through different levels of this core strength where I can swing a golf club, which is really important to me. You know,
Love it.
I can go out and play golf. So I don't think I'm done yet.
Yes.
You know, I love helping college coaches, but consulting it's good, but it's not as good as being in the gym, teaching and pushing kids and helping them. So I'm going to turn 60, but I feel young. I feel good. And I think, you know, who knows?
I have a question. Is Jim McLaughlin available to coach an NCAA Division I team? Is he available to coach a national team in any, somewhere around the world? Are you open to coaching professionally as well? What are you open to right now?
Yeah, I'm open to that for sure. You know, the recruiting, it became so much about recruiting. I was gone every week recruiting and that was, but I missed the coaching so much. Yeah, I could coach, I've talked to Margaret about it, my wife, because she knows me. If I'm going to get into it, I'm going to get back into the black hole and focus on being the best we can be. And she said, that's you. And as long as I'm a good husband, I'm a good dad, I can be a good coach. And those are the three things. But I won't play golf anymore and do the stuff. But I've had a chance to do some of that stuff and it's been enjoyable, but I miss coaching. So would I be open to something? For sure.
Are you able to surf, Jim? Is that going to be the ultimate test for you to feel perfect?
Surfing?
Yes.
Oh, I can surf.
Right now?
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
I don't feel, yeah, I can surf. That being in the water it's therapeutic. Yeah, my boards are in, the home in Malibu, my parents' home. Is still, my boards are in the garage. Yeah, that doesn't, I can't do it like I used to do it. And I won't go out and big surf. I'll go goof around with some friends and just be out in the water, but I'm not going to do it like I did when we were doing contests and stuff.
Jim, my last question to you is what have you learned during, being away from the game, about the concept of balance in life? What should we all take in consideration? Like, we are all obsessed or we just want to be obsessed just like you with just the game. How do we find that balance? And still be hungry about getting better?
I've thought about that deeply. I don't have a lot of answers. I've had a lot of coaches call me and ask me that. Coaching is coaching. You can't change it. I think if you're looking for a lot of balance, you don't coach. I'll be honest with you. To do it the right way takes an investment. It's an investment. Coaching at the highest level is an investment, and you sacrifice certain things. You can't do it 9 to 5. And so I don't know, but maybe, I don't know, Margaret was, you'd have to ask her, because when I was home, she wanted me home and she wanted me present with the girls and her. And I couldn't come home and not be present with her. So, but did she let me work hard? Oh yeah, she supported me. She knew my job, and she knew the better we got, the harder I was going to have to work to feed the monster, But that's a bad answer again, but I don't know.
It's the right answer because it's the honest answer, Jim.
Yeah, but you just pick what's important to you and then stay true to your values, stay true to who you are, and be careful who you listen to.
I think that you said something like really, really important about being present. Even if we have 1 minute with our family, we have a whole day with our family, no matter how much time we have, it's just about being in that moment, making sure that we're embracing the now. And as you say, the why will come, but we make sure that we emphasize on that process, not just in the gym, but with our own families. And that's a lesson that I have learned also the hard way, not the easy way. So I encourage every coach to do the same. But Jim, thank you so much for so many lessons today, and for allowing us to learn a little bit about Jim McLaughlin in the gym, but also outside of the gym. I'm so excited that you said that you're coming back to the game. And I know that people out there are as well. We cannot wait to see where you land. We know for sure that we're going to see you and hopefully win another championship.
You know what? It all sounds good. I'm ready for the work. But Manolo, you do a hell of a job, and I appreciate it. And I've listened to some of your other talks, and it helped me. And I hope you keep doing it. And if you ever have any questions or you have something new in the coaching world, call me and let me know.
Thank you so much for supporting this educational project, Jim. We're going to try to continue to do this. I appreciate the support that everyone has provided as well. Please go and follow Volley Junkies Facebook page. Know also that this and every other interview, I'm trying to upload every single one of them in YouTube. The name of the channel is the same, Volley Junkies. So I invite everyone to go and share with your friends, share with other coaches, and hopefully we can continue to get better. Jim, thanks again. Gracias, amigo.
Thank you, sir.